Today I just want to talk about stuff that I can't really quantify or prove, and I don't know what the deal really is. I just have a lot of clues. But I would like to talk about a few subjects today. One is the way that we eat and the way that humans are in a parasitic mode, and basically that a lot of the whole symbolism of the Garden of Eden is very related to this. And so, we take food in through our mouths and poop it out, and basically that fertilizes the ground, which produces the food, and that's the cycle of life. And it is a snake eating its tail kind of paradigm. It's just interesting to me how some people are more symbiotic with the earth, and, they kind of live more in harmony with nature. They're artistic, and they create art and story. And then other people are just really parasitic, and they tend to mimic the creativity of others. They tend to manipulate, and they're very energetically parasitic and materially very parasitic. So it's just, I think everybody has to grapple with the parasite archetype at some point, and everybody has to deal with the vampires in their life or their own inner vampire. But we all have a parasite within us, and I think a lot of the malfunction at the junction with the ego function is that, the ego becomes like a separate entity, and the ego becomes like a parasite on the self. And so you see people who really go against the self, and they go against themselves in so many different ways, sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally, sometimes mentally. And then there's those people who just they're always putting themselves first, but they dump a lot of their toxic shit onto others and their children and whatnot. I know there will be a lot of death in the future. I think we all know that. And a lot of people want to direct that and decide who lives and who dies and whatever. But, nature has to take its course at some point anyway. But I think, as far as there may not be such a big die-off, actually. It may not be reduced by such a margin. But what if there really is what if there's an energetic level of mind and higher mind functions that are being activated slowly but surely in sections of the population that will, eventually multiply and spread like wildfire. I think there is a new level of mind emerging, and it's maybe also partially going to be caused by people having to face themselves and implode, and because sorrow, really does make you implode. Those of you who know the Three of Swords card know what I mean. It's like, I think a lot of people who I've found to be the most interesting and enlightened people are the people who have been through the most shit and transmuted it. And so that's part of what the work is just getting this ego parasite to let go and let the self, let the self use the ego as a tool and express through it. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. I was thinking about this thing that happened to me a few years ago, and it's not something that, I'm just remembering now and that I forgot about all these years. I've thought about it many times since it happened, but I haven't thought about it for a really long time. I haven't thought about it for a few years, maybe. And this happened to me maybe in 1999, I want to say. Somewhere around there, maybe 2000. But part of it was just the fact that stuff like this happened to me a lot at that point in time. My life is so boring now externally compared to what it was when I was younger. I mean, I want to say, I want to say I was somewhat targeted, but a lot of it wasn't the kind of targeting that is mundane and just these nefarious perp groups or anything. This is there's a whole different level of reality that's going on in the world of the occult. some of these people seem to be from groups that I don't think any of us have ever heard of. So anyway, I'm downtown, and I bought a book, and the book upset me. It totally triggered me, and I was just like really deep in thought, and I was like having one of those moments. But I was at the bus stop, so it was like, there's people around me, so I was just trying to stay in my little bubble and have my emotional moment. Anyway, this guy comes up to me, and he's wearing a baseball cap with a gray alien head on it, only the gray alien head is neon green. And then, so this guy was just like, he says to me, I'm an empath, and I can feel that you're really perturbed right now. Is there anything? He's just like, he was just trying to help but in kind of a weird way. And he was trying to, like, engage me, and I just was like, no, I'm fine. And I can't remember what happened after that, but I just got on the bus, and I remember I just kind of forgot about it. But then a few days later, maybe like even a week, maybe a little longer, it wasn't very long at all, I saw him again. I saw him on the train. And I was definitely, like, kind of weirded out when I saw him again, wearing the same baseball cap, so I totally recognized him. And he was standing facing me, and he was in front of the doors of the train. And it was just a really, like, intense moment, because I felt like he was totally sizing me up. And I was like, okay, this guy again. But I could feel him. It's weird. I could feel him in my mind, and I'm like, no, you're just being paranoid. Nope. So I got up to get off the train, and I went to the left. And right as I was turning to exit the train, I was turning left to exit the train, he was standing facing me, and his fingers were pointing to the opposite direction, over to my right. He was just pointing, but not saying anything. And sure enough, I go to the left to get off the train, but the train doors open at the right side. I hadn't ridden that train, actually, very often. I didn't really know, like, sometimes you get off one way or the other. So it was just funny. And so I just thought, it was just like, get me away from this guy, right? And then next thing you know, I'm like out at a friend's house, and I was just hanging out with her in the afternoon, and she was kind of a creep, and so it was just all a bad vibe. And she lived out in this really icky part of Portland, out like in the Felony Flats area, for those of you who know Portland. And I just did not want to be there, so I left. And I had to wait for the bus out at this, like, almost rural bus stop. I mean, she kind of lived out in one of those, like, places, one of those parts of the city that's on the edge. So I waited at the bus stop, and it's a sketchy neighborhood, and I'm, like, totally feeling tense. But all of a sudden, and this is, like, I think it's King Road or something like that. But anyway, this guy comes walking toward me on this pretty fairly desolate road. There are no cars, and I'm waiting for the bus for 20 minutes, and this guy walks by. And this is, maybe even a week or two after I first seen him. I saw him like a week later, and then this was either like 2-3 weeks later. The whole thing happened within the course of a month or so. But, yeah, there he was. Sorry, it's so loud. So yeah, he was walking by me, and I'm just like, here's this empath guy, and I could feel him again. This guy just had that kind of, like, he could feel me out on the astral for sure. And as he walked by, he just looked at me, and he was carrying a cooler, and I just remember he was talking to me in my head. I was like, no, this is not happening. And he walked by me, and after he walked by me, I could feel him talking to me in my head, and he showed me in my mind the air, fire, and water, and the earth. And as he was showing me this, I was breathing in, and that was the air, and then as I breathed in, I felt my heart beat, and that was the fire, and my blood coursed through my veins, and then the blood coagulated into the water, and then I felt like my flesh and my physical earthy body. And it was the whole thing, it was like I was in some kind of virtual reality for a moment there. It was totally like an astral vision. But it was like he just showed me how my body was the elements. It was him talking in my head. And I was like, is this real? And as soon as I asked that, he turned around and nodded, and then turned back around again. And I was like, holy fuck. And then he kept going, and I said, turn around now. And he turned around right when I said it in my head. I didn't say it out loud. I did not say it out loud. And he was far enough away that he couldn't have, maybe even heard me. I kept doing it for like a couple minutes while he walked away down the street. And he kept turning every time I said it in my head. And I would like wait for a number of seconds. It was creepy. But it was not creepy at the same time. Like my old self, the person inside me who had been raised in this, Christian household and had no, I had weird stuff happen to me in my childhood, but I dismissed it, for the most part. But this was just like one of those moments where I was like, yeah, I'm being shown that there's more going on here than meets the eye. And I haven't met very many people like that, but I've met enough to know there are people who are not as limited as the population. And a lot of them are really fucking evil. They're really bitchy and evil and selfish and sick. And it sucks. Because I think, unfortunately, these kind of powers are actually fairly attainable by anybody who has a certain level of genetic capacity. But I'm definitely had my eyes open early on, and I'm lucky because not all of my teachers were great or anything, but the teachers that came and went, even briefly, like that guy, for the most part were pretty non-exploitative and pretty a lot of so-called teachers out there are just perps. They're looking for prey. One of my teachers once told me that a toxic teacher will make themselves at the center of the circle, and the students have to be in their circle. And he said, but a good teacher is like an 8, and there's 2 circles and they're touching, but each person is at their center, and the teacher doesn't make the student into their slave. It's a master-slave kind of thing, master and apprentice. Anyway, I've ragged on way too long. I should go. Have a good one, guys.